In this video, I'm going to talk you through the alphabet of lines. Anytime that we are communicating through a drawing, it is important to all kind of be speaking the same language, so to speak. There are specific types of lines, specific lines that mean certain things, and I'm going to go through in what they look like. These are generally true throughout most drawings, and you're going to see the phrase alphabet of lines anytime you're in a drafting class, you are in an engineering class, wood shop, metal shop, anything like that. You're going to use these same types of lines to communicate very similar things or the same things. And so the first line, or the first thing is we need to know what tools we're going to use. In order to draw these lines, the important part is to have a pencil. This is just a regular number 2 pencil. It's nice to have one that's not too hard of lead, not too soft of lead, something kind of in the middle. It gives us a lot of variation. If you were to be a professional drafter, you would know much more about the actual pencils you'll use, but we're going to use kind of our standard school pencil for all of this, for most of our drawings, because that's really all we need for the vast majority of things. We also need a straight edge of some sort. I happen to have a ruler so I can measure out as well, but whenever you're drawing, sometimes it doesn't need to have the actual measurements. You're going to relate the drawing from one thing to the other. The first type of line that I'm going to show you is an object line, so I'm going to hold my ruler here, and the object line is one that is solid and dark, like this. It's not the thickest of lines that we're going to be using, but it is one of the thicker of the lines, so we usually call that line weight. Anytime that you're talking about a line, you look at how thick it is, and this one is fairly thick. The next one I'm going to show you is a hidden line, and so a hidden line is one that is just as thick as the object line, except it's dashed evenly. And so I'm going to really quickly sketch these. There are specific spaces that you should have for if you were to, again, be a professional drafter. But in our case, generally they're fairly even. It's what we think of when we think of a dashed line. And there are specific measurements, but in our case we don't need to worry about that as long as it looks pretty close. Okay. A center line is also one that is incredibly common when you're talking about drafting. Anytime you have a circle, so if you have a circle like this, you need to identify where the center is in that way. If you have a cylinder, you also need to identify where's the center of that cylinder if you're looking at it from the side. And so center lines are dashed, but they're dashed in a special way. It's a long, a short, and then a long, and then a short, and then a long, and a short, and a long. And it goes in that pattern for however long that line happens to be. And so you can see how it's different than a hidden line in that it is a long, a short, and a long. The other thing that is different is that they tend to be thinner than object and hidden lines, so there's less of a line weight for that. The next line I'm going to show you is a construction line, and this is one that's really common. You don't see them on finished drawings, but you do see them on work in progress drawings. And for this one, I'm actually going to hold my pencil in a special way. Normally I have a lot of control, I can put a lot of force into my pencil. In this case, I'm barely going to hold my pencil and barely put any force down. And you can see that it is a very light line. It's actually difficult to see on the camera, and that's the way you want these construction lines. You want them to be faint. You usually want them only to be easy to see if you're within arm's reach, or if you are the person drawing, then you can actually see it. Otherwise, everybody else doesn't need to see your draft, your work in progress. Okay? So these ones are incredibly common. You usually start with a construction line, then you will add in an object line and any hidden lines and center lines as you need to. These are on many, many drawings. I would say probably object lines and hidden lines are on most drawings. Center lines, anytime you have something circular, you're going to have those. And then the next few lines that I'm going to go over are ones that are slightly less common, but are still on a lot of drawings. Okay. Sometimes you have a drawing where you need to somehow kind of show little detail, and so maybe you have an object that is like this, and there's a tiny little hole in the corner, and in order to actually show the tiny little detail here, you're actually going to take that little drawing and blow it up somewhere else on the page. And so for that, usually it's kind of this rough break like that. And then what you do here is you kind of also draw the same shape. And so this little squiggly, kind of like if you're ripping paper off of a drawing and then blowing that up, that's what it would look like. And then, so that is your short break line right here. And it's just showing when you need to somehow break out part of that drawing. And you can see it's about the same as, maybe a little bit less than an object line, but it shows where the cutout happens to be. And then from there you would have object lines as well to show that, and then maybe you can see that your circle is right here, and it would allow you to put in your dimensions, put in your actual drawing from there. The next one I'm going to show you is for an object that's really long and you just want to kind of condense the middle of it. So if you had let's say a really long rod that you had a hole in one end, and then way over on the other side is another hole on the other side, and everything in the middle is the same. You don't want to have this like really skinny, really long drawing. And so what you'll do with that is you'll make what's called a long break line, and it's kind of like these heartbeat kind of zigzags right here, and that's telling you that there's more information in the middle here, but it's not something that's highly important. There's not details that in that section, so we're going to condense the drawing, and instead of being from there to here, we're going to see this kind of zigzag thing right here, and that's telling us that, oh, there is something in there, but we don't need to pay attention to it. We're going to make this drawing a little bit smaller, a little more manageable, because we can do that long break. Those two are really not that common. You're not going to see them in every drawing, but you will see them, and so that's why I'm bringing that up. The extension line, anytime you have dimensions, you are actually going to see that in a drawing. And so I actually printed out another drawing that already has object lines. In this case, you can see there's no hidden lines going on here, but we do have object lines, and we want to be able to tell where some of that, or how big this thing is, and where different features are. And so we're actually going to use extension lines and dimension lines, okay? Whenever you make a dimension, it would be really confusing. Let's say this is 1.5 inches, so if I type in 1.5 and I put that on that drawing right there, it becomes really difficult to either read the letters or the numbers. Sometimes that period gets lost with the object line. And so what we do is we extend that out. And so we draw our lines out from our drawing. And so those are our extension lines. And then once we have that dimension out, we can actually draw in our dimension line. You'll notice with our extension lines that there's just a little bit of a gap. So if you were to look really closely, you would see the object line and all that, but you would see a gap in between there. So that's saying it's not a continuous line. It makes it kind of easier to understand. And then a dimension line is usually right here. It's about the same width as a extension line, but it is thinner than object lines. And traditionally we put arrows on the ends there, and that's telling us from here to here is a certain dimension. Often, and it kind of depends on the style that you're going for, and the computer, whenever we get to computer drafting, we're going to see this much more often. The computer actually makes this little break that I put in here, and then the dimension can go right there. That's easier to read and to see than if we were to put it overlapping with this object line. The last line that I'm going to show you is a leader line. So let's say we had a circle right here, and we wanted to tell everybody what the diameter of that circle is. We are going to draw a line right here, and then another line like this. Again, it is about the same thickness as your extension lines. It's thinner than your object lines, and there's usually an arrow pointing there. Now, you'll notice that these are vertical, these are horizontal, so our dimension lines are horizontal here, or vertical. They align with everything. These leader lines are always supposed to be diagonal. So they're always at an angle of some sort. Should not be straight over, should not be straight up and down. And so from there you can type in, and let's say this would be, or you can write in 0.5, and we can use our diameter symbol to tell everybody, oh, the diameter is 0.5. The last thing is I'm going to go back to our center line, because not only does it tell us where the center is, we're going to actually be able to say that, use that center line to say where's the center of this circle right here, not only left to right, but also up and down. And so you can see how the center line comes into play for what's called a center mark as well. Okay, so there is the beginning of our alphabet of lines. We've got object lines, hidden lines, center lines, construction lines, short break lines, long break lines, extension lines, dimension lines, and leader lines. And there are a few other ones that we're going to cover later on in the course, but for right now, these are the ones that you're going to see most